Hello, I hope you had an amazing day, and I hope you're having an amazing day if you're watching or listening from abroad. And if you're watching or listening from Kenya, I hope you had an amazing day and you're having an amazing evening. This is the Black Hot Fire News Daily Updates with me, Dimore. We'll be looking at what has been happening throughout Africa today, all the headline hitters, what was hitting the headline today. I'm going to start with there's a lot that's been happening from Kenya to Guinea to Egypt to Gambia, and of course, to Haiti. So we're going to be talking about what has been hitting the headlines today, keeping you on the know on what has been happening in this beautiful continent of ours. And let us start with Kenya. When the Kenya National the KNHRC, that is the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, now wants the National Assembly to hold the British Army operating in the country to account for several cases of human abuse. KNHRC is urging Parliament to act on British Army's alleged crimes in Kenya. In a report presented to the Defense Foreign Relations Committee, the committee listed several incidences of murder, rape, and exploitation that have been allegedly committed by the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, commonly known as BATUK. In a report submitted by the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, Commissioner Professor Marion Mutugi, 43 complaints received by the Commission against BATUK date back as far as 1975. In the report, Kenya National Human Rights Commission points to the mistrust by the host community in the British Army following several incidences of lack of justice where the army has been accused of committing different crimes, including murder. The different crimes include murder, they include rape, and of course, maiming and assault. The report reads, and I quote, "This highlights systematic issue of delayed or non-existent justice for victims of incidents where BATUK is involved." BATUK being the British Army Training Unit in Kenya. BATUK means British Army Training Unit in Kenya. The commission highlighted a case where a woman was murdered by one of the servicemen in the BATUK Army in 2012, but only came to light in 2021 and caused an uproar among Kenyans. The report read, and I quote, "The DCI took over the investigations, but this event, among others, contribute to the existing mistrust and concern within the community on the perception and of impunity and lack of accountability for BATUK's action. The Commission now wants Parliament to ensure the army is held accountable for their actions and to follow human rights and the law of the land." Professor Mutugi challenged the National Assembly to come up with the laws that will make sure the army is accountable and the community feels safe. The committee chair and Belgut MP, his name is Nelson Koech, lamented on how long it has taken for victims to get justice and promised the investigation will yield fruits. So one of the cases is that of a woman who was killed in 2012. The woman was killed by an armed man from the BATUK being the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, and this is the case.
To identify Agnes, even in old photos of her as a high school student, her signature smile consistently present. Fond memories abound in Rosemary Wanjiko's home. She is Agnes's sister. She and her family lived with Agnes and her child at the time of her death. It is easy to identify Agnes, even in old photos of her as a high school student, her signature smile consistently present. Her family reckons it hid her bubbly and jovial side, which they say they miss the most about her. Agnes, who had a 5-month-old child at the time, was working as a hairdresser until she went missing in March 2012. Kulikuwa tarehe za toa, wewe ulikuwa kwa leba, nikakuja msichana wangu ule mkubwa, nikamwita kwa shule yako wapi, akaniambia shule ameenda na wewe na sisi. The next day, Agnes had still not shown up at her sister's home, as was the norm. Agnes's friend Florence told Rose that her sister was last spotted at Lions Court Hotel. Rose says she made her way there alongside their uncle, Mureithi Kamuvo, seeking answers. Tukaambia hakuna mtu kama huyo, labda tuangalie kwa masaba ya wazibu na huko. Sasa tukauliza huyo lazima kwa masaba gani na walikuwa na wewe waliwaza huko. While Agnes's sister did not know then, this would be the biggest hint yet that a British soldier was involved in Agnes's disappearance. One of Agnes's relatives, who requested us to conceal her identity, adds to the weight of the events surrounding Agnes's disappearance. We will identify her by the name Lucy. Akaenda akapata huyo soja akamwambia walikuja 3 guards wakaingia kwa room na mzungu. It happens that there was a fight in that room. Yakakuwa in that room kulikuwa na fight kilivunjika. Those 2 months walikuwa na kumtatua kwa uncle yangu. Utaona that uncle alikuwa kwa hiyo septic tank analia hapo sana. But hakuwa anajua ati hapo ndipo sister yake atakuwa hapo kwa sister yako. The principal magistrate's opinion on the murder inquest, which also details various submissions, indicates that on the 5th of June 2012, the toilets and other facilities at the Lions Court Hotel got blocked. The septic tank near the kitchen was emitting an unusually foul smell. The gardener who worked in the maintenance section, John Geshuki Ndiramo, headed to the tank to clean it, but inside, he found the body of a female floating in the sewage. He said he was shaken, traumatized, felt like he was losing his mind. He immediately reported the matter to the manager, who then informed the hotel's then general manager, George Njuguna Wangari. Police were called to the scene, and alongside the fire brigade team, they retrieved the body and ferried it to the mortuary. All she had was a bra. The rest of her clothing was not found at the hotel. Rose was called in for identification and possible confirmation of her sister. In her recollection, it was a tragic end to the search for Agnes. Alikuwa na ndugu baka huko. Na alikuwa hapa kwa mguu alikuwa kama ile pipa ilikuwa inaonekana. Hizo zilikuwa zinakaa. Na kwa vidole za mguu alikuwa amekata hizi zile hakuna hizi labda amebaki na hizi bongo. The search may have been over, but the pain Agnes's family had only escalated and intensified. According to the post-mortem examination conducted by Dr. Obiero Okoth, who was a pathologist at the Kenyatta National Hospital, one injury was a blow to Agnes's chest, while the other was a stab wound on her lower right abdomen. The doctor also determined that Agnes was still alive when she was thrown into the septic tank, as her injuries were not severe enough to cause death. The pathologist attributed her missing fingers and toes to the level of decomposition, which he says is expected in light of the time she had spent in the septic tank. If someone has been murdered in the hotel, or maybe something has broken, or maybe you have gotten blood spots on the floor, you should call the police fast, because you don't know what is happening. But again, the hotel decided to just to cover up the case, and then even this suspect, Soldier 8, was helped. Like I can say, he was helped by someone from the hotel, because how can a new person in the hotel know where the septic tank isn't? The allegation of a cover-up by the management is not necessarily far-fetched. Douglas Obiero, also known as DJ Dagi, was on duty at the Lions Court Hotel on the night of 31st March 2012. He was among those that last saw Agnes alive, but says the police never interviewed him about the disappearance or death. For clarity, as this report proceeds, it is important to note that the British soldiers are nicknamed and referred to as Johnny.
Sasa mimi kaingia mapema. Kapoa. Majini wakakamu walikuja mbele ya kwanza. Watu soma. Kwa kama ndio walizikamu. So ikakuwa busy. Ikakuwa busy walabu tupu bado imejaa. na mmoja akaniambia where are the ladies, kaja give me a minute, nikatumia mambo zangu, wakakuja taksi kama 6 mademu. Yeah, hata tulibonga naye huyo best yake alizonisquat au ya bila dagi na kuna dobe get busy, kuna vile wao wanacheza, so hiyo ndio na mimi nicheze kizangu kwa muziki.
Douglas says that the next day, he was going about his errands when he heard rumors that Agnes had gone missing. He went on to inform the general manager, George, who said he had no knowledge of such a case. Then things went quiet until the 5th of June, when Agnes's body was found in the septic tank.
So that is a case of one Agnes who was killed by British soldiers, and that was in 2012. It is 2024. Nothing has ever been done, and that is one of the 75 cases that the Kenya National Human Rights Commission was talking about today in the National Assembly, that they have 75 cases, 43 complaints have been received by the commission against B.H.F.N. B.H.F.N is the British Army training unit in Kenya. So they have a camp somewhere in Nanyuki, and that was one of the women that they killed about 12 years ago, and nothing has ever been, justice has ever been done, and it is very sad. So now the Kenya National Human Rights Commission is urging the parliament to act on British Army's alleged crimes in Kenya that include murders, rape, and a lot of other bad things. So let us wait and see what will transpire after the Kenya National Human Rights Commission submission to parliament, which is all bureaucracy. I don't think anything is going to happen. But anyway, let us head to another sad story in Kenya, where 2 people died today as planes collided mid-air in Nairobi. 2 people have been confirmed dead following a mid-air collision between 2 planes in Nairobi. The deceased are reported to be a trainee pilot and an instructor who are on board a Cessna aircraft belonging to 99 Flying School. The aircraft crashed into Nairobi National Park, killing the 2 on the spot. The second aircraft, a Dash 8, belongs to Safari Link Aviation Limited, which has since confirmed that the flight was headed to Diani with 39 passengers and 5 crews on board when it experienced a loud bang soon after takeoff. No casualties were reported from the Safari Link airline. Safari Link released a statement that reads, and I quote, "Safari Link Aviation wishes to report that this morning at 9:45 local time, our flight number 053 with 39 passengers and 5 crews on board headed to Diani experienced a loud bang soon after takeoff. The crew decided to immediately turn back to Nairobi Wilson Airport for further inspection and assessment and landed safely. There were no casualties reported." End of quote. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, has since commenced investigation to establish the circumstances that led to the collision, and they released a statement that reads, and I quote, "Investigations have commenced through various agencies such as the Air Accident Investigation Department and the National Police Service to establish the cause of the accident." So those are 2 people who died today after 2 planes collided in Nairobi. Let us now head out of Kenya and look at Mozambique. Mozambique is set to receive support from Algeria in their anti-terror fight. Algeria has pledged that it will support Mozambique in its fight against terrorism in the northern province of Cabo Delgado, Mozambique's new, that is according to Mozambique's news agency AIM. Summarizing a 4-day working visit to Algeria, Mozambican president, his name is Filipe Nyusi, made the announcement on Sunday. He said that both delegations spoke on forms of equipping, exchanges of information, adding that they were going to cooperate in the defense and security mission. While work on signing the documents is being moved on, Nyusi said that the Algerian government had promised to immediately support an individual equipment for members of the local militias who are fighting the terrorists alongside the armed forces. Mozambique's ties with Algeria are decades old. Fighters in Mozambican independence war received their own training in Algeria. That was in the 1960s. President Filipe Nyusi's announcement come after Mozambique's government confirmed on Feb 27 that over 60,000 people were driven from their homes by a wave of recent jihadist attack in the restive region. The hydrocarbon-rich Cabo Delgado one. Troops from Rwanda and the South African Development Community deployed in support of the Mozambican army. So we have troops from Rwanda and also who are fighting in Mozambique right now to support the Mozambican army, which has been fighting terrorists in the hydrocarbon-rich area sometimes now.
Terrorism in the northern province of Cabo Delgado, Mozambique's news agency AIM reported Monday, summarizing a 4-day visit. Algeria Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi made the announcement on Sunday. He hinted at forms of equipping and exchanges of information between his country and Algeria, adding that an instrument that will guide cooperation in defense and security will be concluded. Nyusi said that the Algerian government has promised immediate support in individual equipment for members of the local militias who are fighting alongside the armed forces. The two nations share decades-old ties. Fighters in the Mozambican independence war received their own training in Algeria in the 1960s. President Nyusi's announcement comes after the government confirmed on February 27th that over 60,000 Mozambicans were driven from their homes by recent jihadist attacks in the hydrocarbon-rich Cabo Delgado province.
So that is what has been happening in Mozambique with a fight against the alleged jihadists. Allegedly, they are fighting against jihadists who are, I said allegedly because in war there's a lot of propaganda, and so according to government reports, which might be is propaganda, they're fighting against jihadists. And so that was Algeria promising to send troops to Mozambique to help them in their fight against terror. Let us now head to DRC, where the SADC army chiefs visited Goma. The SADC is the South African Development Commission, the South African Development Community. So the top army officials from the South African Regional Bloc visited the Eastern DRC on Saturday. That is amid ongoing fighting between government troops and the March 23 rebels. The Chief of Defense Staff of South African Development Community, SADC, held a high-level meeting in the city of Goma, capital of the embattled North Kivu province. Congolese army spokesman, his name is Sylvain Ekenge, said, and I quote, "It was a question of assessing the progress of operations on the ground and fine-tuning strategies for strengthening them." He added that the visit by the chiefs of staff was a strong signal of the commitment and determination of SADC and Burundi alongside the DRC. It was their first coordination meeting since the deployment of SADC troops in the North Kivu, and came 2 days after the SADC armored vehicles were hit during an M23 attack. So I reported this SADC, that is the South African Development Community, sent 2,000 troops, 2,900 troops to DRC. This was after MONUSCO, that is the UN peacekeepers, MONUSCO, and the Kenyan army and many other armies who were there in DRC left after the government of DRC deemed them ineffective. So what replaced them was now the SADC army, that is the South African Development Community Army, that is made of 2,900 troops. So now top army officials from the bloc were in DRC on Saturday, and on Friday, as generals visited the strategic town of Sake, the rebels threw 5 bombs, killing and wounding several people. So the M23 were attacking even as the top army officials from SADC were in the meeting, and several people were killed and others wounded as they threw 5 bombs. Some of the residents of Goma are not sure if the visit is going to make a difference in terms of the ongoing fighting, as they are saying they have seen many other armies come to DRC and yet nothing ever changes. The M23, which is allegedly financed by Rwanda, according to what the US and the French government said, as once again propaganda in war. The M23 has captured large sections of the North Kivu province, forcing people to flee their homes. Aid organizations fear a new humanitarian crisis in the region, which is already happening, as their advance threatens to cut off Goma City and leave millions of people struggling for food and medical help. The eastern part of DRC has been in violence from local and foreign armed groups for nearly 30 years now.
Amid ongoing fighting between M23 rebels and government forces, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, regional army officials have visited the area. Amid ongoing fighting between M23 rebels and government forces in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, regional army officials have visited the area. The Chiefs of Defence Staff of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, on Saturday held a high-level meeting in the city of Goma, capital of the embattled North Kivu province. It was a question of assessing the progress of operations on the ground and fine-tuning strategies for strengthening them. The visit of Chiefs of Staff from SADC and the DRC to Goma is a strong signal of the commitment and determination of SADC and Burundi alongside the DRC. The situation in the region is tense. On Thursday, SADC armored vehicles were hit during an M23 attack, and on Friday, as generals visited the strategic town of Sake, the rebels threw bombs, killing several people. We welcome their presence here, and we think that it has enabled them to understand the situation, having experienced the reality on the ground in terms of insecurity. Because while they were here, Sake was bombed. 5 bombs yesterday.
5 bombes hier.
It was SADC's first coordination meeting since the deployment of its troops in North Kivu. But some residents of Goma are not sure the visit will make a difference. We remain skeptical because we know that the future of the Congo in terms of security issues can only come from internal strategies taken by the army and not by the SADC countries. The M23 has seized large swathes of the region, forcing thousands of people to flee and causing a dire humanitarian crisis.
So that is what has been happening in DRC with the SADC army officials, the South African Development Community army officials, visiting the area after they deployed 2,900 soldiers to go and fight the troops, the rebel groups that are there, the over 100 armed rebel groups in Congo, and there's a whole humanitarian crisis going on in Congo. Let us now head to Haiti, where gangs in Haiti tried to seize control of the main airport today. Heavily armed gangs tried to seize control of Haiti's main international airport. It was yesterday, not today, on Monday, exchanging gunfire with police and soldiers in the latest attack on key government sites in an explosion of violence that includes a mass escape from the country's 2 biggest prisons. The Toussaint I'm not sure if I'm getting the pronunciation right. The Toussaint Louverture International Airport was closed when the attack occurred, with no planes operating and no passengers on site. According to press journalists, according to journalists, they saw an armored truck on the tarmac shooting at gangs to try and prevent them from entering the airport grounds, as scores of employees and other workers fled from the bullets. It is the biggest attack on the airport in Haiti's history. Last week, the airport was struck briefly by bullets amid ongoing gang attack, but enter the airport nor seize control of it. all of it. The attack occurred just hours after authorities in Haiti ordered a nighttime curfew following violence in which armed gang members overran the two biggest prisons and freed thousands of inmates over the weekend. A 72-hour state of emergency began Sunday night. The government said it would try and track down the escaped inmates, including from a penitentiary that where the vast majority were. Gangs already were estimated to control up to 80% of Port-au-Prince, that is the capital. They are increasingly coordinating their actions and now choosing other targets like the central bank. Prime Minister Ariel Henry was in Kenya last week to try and salvage support from a United Nations-backed security force to help stabilize Haiti in its conflict with the increasing powerful crime groups. Benin also agreed to send troops to Haiti, and that is what has been happening in Haiti, with yesterday gangs trying to seize control of the main airport. I reported on this because we have Kenyan troops and other troops from Africa, 3,900 in total, going to this country to try and bring calm to it, allegedly in a UN-backed mission. So that was what has been happening in Haiti, and let us now head to Egypt, where Egypt has sentenced top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood to death. Egypt on Monday sentenced 8 members of the Muslim Brotherhood to death for their role in the deadly violence of 2013, which followed the military ouster of Mohamed Morsi, the country's first democratically elected president. Those condemned to death by the Emergency Supreme Court of State Security sitting in Cairo included the Brotherhood's Supreme Guide. His name is Muhammad Badle. Badi was the 8th Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood and led the group between 2010 and 2013 when he was arrested during the army's coup against Morsi's government. Some of the men who are condemned have already been sentenced to death in other cases. The men were accused of conspiring to topple the government of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who himself came to power after overthrowing Mohamed Morsi. They were accused of killing policemen and destroying public property. In July 2013, the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood organized a massive sit-in in the Rabal al-Adawa to denounce the coup. Security forces later raided the square and killed hundreds of people in a single day in what they termed as a counter-terrorism operation. Morsi, who was the first president of Egypt, died in prison in 2019. So today, Egypt has sentenced top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood to death for orchestrating the coup against Morsi, even though the current president was a beneficiary of the coup. Let us now head to Zimbabwe, where the US has imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe's president and first lady and 9 top officials. The United States on Monday imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe president. His name is Emmerson Mnangagwa, the first lady Auxilla Mnangagwa, and the vice president Constantino Chingwenga, and 8 other senior officials. The United States Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control accused the 11 individuals and 3 entities of being involved in corruption and serious human rights abuse. Mnangagwa is accused of protecting gold and diamond smugglers who operate in Zimbabwe, directing government officials to facilitate the sale of gold and diamonds in illicit markers, and taking bribes in exchange for his service, among other offenses. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said they were being designated under the global Magnitsky sanctions program. That is the sanctions that they had on Mnangagwa and 11 other people. President Joe Biden also Monday signed an executive order that terminates Zimbabwe's national emergency and revokes Zimbabwe-specific sanctions. Now the administration is using a Trump-era executive order that implements what is called the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. That is an act that says you can impose sanctions on other leaders if you feel like they're not doing what you want, but of course you're going to use terms like serious human rights abuse and other things. So that is what is happening in Zimbabwe, with Mnangagwa now having sanctions, allegedly because he has been, according to the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken, The sanctions were because of the bribes he was taking, especially in the gold and diamond market. I don't have to tell you why the sanctions were put in place and why it had to be with the diamonds and the gold, but that is what is going to happen now. So Mnangagwa, his vice president, and 11 other officials was sanctioned today by the United States of America.
US on Monday imposed sanctions on Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, the First Lady Ottilia Mnangagwa, the Vice President Constantino Chiwanga, and 8 other senior officials. The United States Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control accuses the 11 individuals and 3 entities of being involved in corruption or serious human rights abuse. The U.S. Secretary of State said they were being designated under the Global Magnitsky Sanctions Program. Consequently, all property and interests in property of the designated persons that are in the U.S. or in the possession or control of U.S. citizens are blocked. The designations are part of the sanctions policy towards Zimbabwe the U.S. is implementing following the termination of a 2-decade-old sanctions program.
So I think I personally believe that is used as a tool of manipulation, as a tool to a blackmail, not defending Mnangagwa. He's probably not the best leader Zimbabwe can have. He must be corrupt, as they are saying. But I think they also use that as a tool. The using that as a tool, a blackmail tool. If they tell you to do something and you don't do it, then they are going to impose sanctions on you. And now you won't be able to travel anywhere. And now you won't be able to. There are many things you won't be able to do. So I am really against this global Magnitsky sanctions program, that whatever it is, and that says that you can sanction another leader for, if you believe they are corrupt, you can sanction them. And therefore, that is what is happening in Zimbabwe. And with that, we are coming to the end of our news update today. Kamlesh and Joby are coming up next with a musical show. It is a night where 2 people have died in Kenya as planes collided mid-air in Nairobi. It is also a night where the Kenya National Human Rights Commission has urged Parliament to act on British Army alleged crimes in Kenya that are 78 in total, with 43 complaints having been received against the Batuk being the British Army training unit in Kenya, including the murder of a woman named Agnes in 2012, which has never seen justice. It is also a night where Mozambique is set to receive support from Algeria in their anti-terror fight. It is also a night where the South African Development Community, the SADC army chiefs, visited Goma in what they are calling a peacekeeping mission. It is also a night where gangs in Haiti tried to seize control of the main airport, with Kenya and Benin troops expected to be in Haiti soon. It is also a night where Egypt sentenced top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood to death for allegedly orchestrating the 2012 coup against the first president of Egypt, the first democratically elected president of Egypt. His name was Morsi. So you're now up to date on what has been happening throughout the whole of Africa. You now know what has been happening throughout all the tomorrow on the Black Hole Fire News Update. But before that, make sure to join Kalesh and Joby in a minute. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day if you're watching from abroad, and I hope you have an amazing night if you're watching from Kenya. It's always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.